are celebrating something that we call, thank you, celebrating something that we call BAM, Buddhist Action Month. And I think Ian is going to put a PDF in the chat. Thank you, Zach. For those of you online and those of you here in person, so you can, there's a printout of this PDF downstairs, so you can take one copy at the end of the evening. Put it on your fridge if you want for the rest of the month. And yeah, I'm very proud that we are doing this month. So my good friend Catherine there and me have been thinking a bit of how to showcase it, as it were, some topics related to the theme of Buddhist Action Month. So the theme is compassion and connection in times of crisis. So in a way, it's a good opportunity for us to think a bit about our activity as Buddhists in the world. Yeah? So how we are affecting others. There's a very common criticism against Buddhism about Buddhism can be a bit too inwards looking. Yeah, it's not my experience of Buddhism. Since I've been part of Triratna, there's always been an outwards looking, into society. But yeah, I think something that we in Triratna have to offer to the world is the power of Sangha. Yeah, there's a real sense of transformation of lives and communities in Triratna. So just grab a copy on the way out, and for those of you online, you should have now access to the PDF. And tonight we're going to be looking at the first night of 4 nights that we have been working on. With a very relevant topic, a bit of a difficult topic as well. And the title of the night is The Race Conversation. But before I start going there, I would like to invite Kusala Devi to introduce a bit something.
Good. Can you hear me online? Yeah, great. Okay, good. So just a big welcome, everyone. I think most of you know, but yeah, my name's Kusala Devi, and yeah, Aryav actually asked me to say just a few words just to sort of kick off or start the evening in a way. So I'm the chair here at the Buddhist Centre, which means that I sort of support and guide the Sangha in the direction that we sort of hope to go in, which is a real privilege, actually. I like to think of my role as like being a friend to the Sangha. So you're talking about the importance of friendship. So that's how I like to think of my role, as being a friend to the Sangha and to the centre, supporting that in whatever way I can. And I'm just really glad that this evening is happening. I'd just like to rejoice really in Aryavachan, actually, just to start that off. So, yeah, I mean, there's lots of different strands now. My mind's doing this. But yeah, in terms of Aryavachan, just rejoicing in the work that he's done here at the centre in particular, around setting up a context for people of colour to come together and practice. And just how well you've done that, just how well you've created a context for friendships, which means that other people are able to sort of step into that. So I'm very glad that's happening. And yeah, just to touch very sort of briefly really on our vision, that we're still, as always with any good vision, it's always being constantly sort of revised and looked at and renewed. But yeah, the vision that we came up with last year in the Sangha was this sort of threefold vision of deepening practice in the current Sangha, facing outward and responding to the world, and making the Dharma accessible to more people, so having an inclusive and diverse Sangha. And all of us on the council are very sort of behind that vision and really want that to come into action in as many ways as we can. And I guess like one of the things that comes into that is this area of the race conversation, and how we as a Sangha can be more welcoming, but also more aware of people coming into the Sangha and deepening their experience within the Sangha. If you're a person of colour, how is that? What's that like? I mean, just to say personally for me, the death of George Floyd in 2020. Yeah, gosh, the years went funny, didn't they, during that time? Yeah, was a real, very strong moment of me sort of facing my own conditioning around my own, you know, how I relate to race actually in the world. And I really want to do the work of exploring that more and more in myself, and supporting those conversations actually within the Sangha as well, because, you know, they are part of our Sangha, they're an important part of our world. And yeah, they're, I think, difficult areas that we all can face towards. And I think what the Dharma, what the Buddhist practice gives us is those tools of empathy, compassion, courage, friendship, awareness, you know, those tools that really just help us sort of turn and face those areas and support one another. So I just sort of really invite all of us to do that work. And I'm just, yeah, very glad that Arivachin is sort of leading this evening. Yeah, I think that's enough. I'll just hand over to you. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Kusala Devi. Yep. So yeah, and departing from there, I just really want to say thank you to the friends from the East Midlands People of Colour group that are here tonight. Some of you have been helping me, supporting me with that effort from the beginning. So I'm going to say a bit more about the history of the group in a moment. But I just wanted to start by, I'm very glad that Paraga referred to that statement from Sangharachita earlier on. So I wanted to go there, departing from there, yeah? So the founder of the Triratna Buddhist community and the Triratna Buddhist order, Organ Sangharachita, put that sentence, you know, together of why he was a Buddhist. Yeah? So I'm going to read some just extracts from that. So Buddhism can be understood and practiced anywhere in the world, because Buddhism addresses itself to the individual human being, regardless of race, nationality, caste, sex, or age. This is one of the reasons why I am a Buddhist. I believe that humanity is basically one. I believe that it's possible for any human being to communicate with any other human being, to feel for any other human being, to be friends with any other human being. This is what I truly and deeply believe. This belief is part of my own experience. It is part of my own life. It is part of me. I cannot live without this belief, and I would rather die than give it up. To me, to live means to practice this belief. Therefore, this belief is part of my religion. It has nothing to do with the way in which I dress, nothing to do with what I call myself. It is a matter of the way I am, the way I exist. It is the way I naturally function in the world. It is what you are prepared to die for. It is your life. It is what makes you what you are. It is what makes you behave in the way you do. Yeah? And that's a very strong statement, I think. You know, it's a very powerful motivation to be in the world. And I remember my own encounter with Triratna, and my process of committing with Triratna has a lot to do with exercise and that belief. Yeah. So when I got involved with the Mérida Buddhist Center in my hometown in Venezuela, one of the first things that I did is training as a social activist. So I went to Cuba and I did a course on social activism. And then I came back to Venezuela and worked in the slums in Venezuela around the Mérida Buddhist Center. And for me, that was an expression not so much of the ideology of the government, you know, that was ruling the country. It was much more an expression of my commitment as a Buddhist. Yeah. So, and I think that that's a very good departing point for what we are going to do tonight. I must admit that I'm feeling a bit nervous about the conversation tonight, because it's beautiful, you know, when we welcome people here to the center. It's always very beautiful to see people coming along and seeing people's lives being transformed, you know, and committed. And but obviously there are some topics that are not as easy to deal with, and race is one of them. So what I really want to do tonight is to have a conversation about race, and I want to stress that it's a conversation. So it's not so much about me telling you how you should think or how you should feel. You know, it's much more about an exploration. And I'm going to be borrowing heavily from this book. This is Kusala Davis' copy. So it's called The Race Conversation. So I borrow the title for the evening, and it's being written by Mitra, Triratna Mitra, who is training for ordination. He lives in London. His name is Eugene Ellis. And that, in this effort that we've been doing in Triratna since that moment that Kusala Devi mentioned of the killing of George Floyd, I'll say a bit more about him in a moment. We've been learning quite a bit in Triratna. So just this Sunday, we started a reading circle on Sunday nights. It's going to be 8 weeks process. So it's a very beautiful community of people coming together, you know, to share experiences and to share reflections around this. And it's people. I have an affinity group that I'm in, and we are 3 people from England, but there is somebody from the States and somebody from Australia as well. And so I really enjoy that element of internationality. I think Triratna is very good at that. You know, the internationality aspect of Triratna is very good. But I'm going to start by mentioning this man here. So this is a picture of George Floyd, who was killed in 2020, as Kusala Devi was remembering. And it was quite shocking for many of us, his death, basically because it was a public execution, isn't it? So it was recorded and it was available for everybody. And that became iconic, those 8 minutes, 46 seconds, you know, of the video. And so he died in Minnesota. And something that Eugene says in the book, he starts the first chapter of the book talking about George Floyd, I'm going to be reading quite a bit from what Eugene says. If you have never thought about racism before, and you watch or listen to these videos and testimonies, you will begin to understand what the stakes are and what it means for you as a person of color or as a white person. So I think it really shocked everybody, you know, just to see that there, just so visibly. Maybe it challenged assumptions that we had about race and racism, you know, that we thought that we were in a different moment, you know, of our societies or of our civilization. And just seeing that there, you know, so visceral in a way, took us somewhere. I imagine, you know, I really enjoy the way you spoke there, Kusala Devi, just sort of a very personal, individual journey, you know, that started there. It affected us in Triratna, it affected us here in Nottingham. So I remember us having different conversations around that time, and Kusala Devi and another friend from the Sangha, Rachel Woodburn, they both put together a statement on behalf of the Nottingham Buddhist Center about the Black Lives Matter movement. So I want to read just 2 paragraphs of that statement. Along with so many others at this time, the Council of the Nottingham Buddhist Center feels compelled to speak out against the atrocious killing of George Floyd, whose death, which has arisen out of systemic racism, is tragically only one in a recent list. We feel the need to also recognize that the structural racism is not limited to the US. It occurs in the UK, it occurs in Nottingham. We aim to learn much more about the obvious and subtle manifestations of racism. We also commit to learning how we can have the courage to both identify and speak out against injustices, do more to encourage a diverse Sangha, and connect and empathize with Black communities at home and abroad. We are open to feedback about how we can do this. We also recognize our individual responsibility to do this work as Buddhists and as human beings. And I think it's also, we all in the council at the time stand behind those, those statements. And I just wanted to recognize tonight, George Floyd. Yeah, he wasn't a Buddhist. I don't know much about his life. For me, it will be, if you practice the Metabhavana, we usually talk about the neutral person. Yeah, so it will be somebody that I will probably naturally put in that category. But we owe so much to the way he gave his life, yeah? The entire world. Yeah? So I thought it's just fair, that he is there with us tonight. Yeah, it's difficult sometimes, when you are trying to commit your life to live according to certain principles, and you have a very clear vision. Sometimes that vision takes quite a while to manifest, to be expressed in your life. So very soon after the killing of George Floyd, we started our People of Colour group in Nottingham. That was in October 2020. And it was a very small group of us. It was just 5 of us starting. So 4 of us are here. Well, five of you plus me, so 6. So 4 of you are here. I don't know if Maria has managed to connect, not yet. So I just want to mention you by name. So Laura, Nina, Gita, and Olmer. So we started those meetings back then. And it was interesting because I think at the beginning we just wanted to meet. It wasn't clear, what was going to be the result of doing that. Yeah? Well, we've been going for a year and a half. But that thing I was saying a moment ago about vision, and I really like something that Sangharachita used as a title for one of his books once, is vision and transformation. That process of transformation can be much more slower. So it has taken us a year and a half, more or less, to have an evening about this topic. So what I really want is that this is the beginning of a process. I want to invite you to think of this as the beginning of a process. Yeah? By no means this is the last. I hope this is not the last time that we have a conversation about race, yeah, in our Sangha. I think we need to have more and more of that. So I'm just going to quote a few things about the race conversation, and then I'm going to invite you to do an exercise, a couple of things as an exercise. So why it is important to have a conversation about race, according to Eugene. Race conversations between individuals and between groups offer great potential for change and healing. And there are many contexts for the race conversation to take place. These conversations can happen between people of color and white people, between people of color and other people of color, and between white people and other white people. So this is not the only context where we can have this conversation, and hopefully, this will be the beginning also of a process of us thinking of how we can create opportunities to have that discussion, maybe with other friends in the Sangha, yeah, in other places. He mentions 2 things that I think is important, that maybe when we think about talking with somebody about race, that probably puts us off, yeah, from engaging with that. What complicates the race conversation, as we have all probably experienced, is the emotional soup that gets evoked that plays havoc in our cognitive and rational minds. The left side of our brain is eager for understanding and is brilliant at it. But with emotions running high, instead of our cognition helping us, it just appears to make things worse. Most race conversations happen internally. So that first paragraph is about us being in communication with others. Yeah. Most race conversations happen internally, within the confines of our own minds and bodies. These internal conversations are typically activated when we hear casual racism, or when we witness or experience the grosser acts of racism out in the world. This internal conversation is generally in the form of conscious, competing voices in our heads, which result in confusion or a truth-making silence. Okay, how are we doing? Is this working? Yeah, okay, good. So I want to invite you now to begin the conversation with yourself. Yeah? So let's take some time, and I invite you to take some paper and pens here from the front, and just those of you at home, you just grab your piece of paper and pen. And I want just you, do whatever you need, if you want to close your eyes, if you want to go in a bit of a short meditation. But I would like you to remember, just 2 pointers. Maybe remember the killing of George Floyd. Yeah? And where were you there, when that happened? And what was your response? If you can write that down. Yeah? That's one thing. And the other thing is, try to evoke or remember a situation and experience of discrimination in your life, that you have experienced discrimination. It doesn't need to be about race, It might be about gender, it might be about class, it might be about caste. Yeah. So whatever comes to mind, just try to, and this is very personal. You're not going to share this with anybody, yeah? But I just want for you to start the conversation with yourself, and let's have a few minutes to do that. Yeah. So I'll invite you to come forward and grab a piece of paper and pen. So I'm going to mark 5 minutes, but I'll ask, in the second bell, I'll ask if we need more time or not. So. Is that enough time? Yeah. Okay. So this guy, Eugene Ellis, he's a therapist. And the book, the approach of the book is basically that of looking at, in a way, sort of a healing process, around race. Yeah? So I'm going to say a bit more about that in a moment. But there are three concepts that I want to introduce next, which I think might be helpful for us, to think in how we approach this topic in our lives. So first of all, there is something called intersectionality, which is multiple factors of advantage or disadvantage that form our identities. Yeah? So, for example, gender, caste, sex, race, ethnicity, class, sexuality, religion, disability, weight, physical appearance, and height. Yeah. So we have a sense of who we are by having a reading, a particular understanding of those characteristics in our lives, how they apply to our lives. Yeah. And that makes, in the book, Eugene puts this example of, that makes that it's very unlikely, he says, that a black gay man and a black gay woman will have the same experience. So even if they are exposed to the same experience of racism in their lives, their understanding of that might be very different depending on those qualities. Yeah. I think this area of identity is very important, has been very important to me. So I personally come from a country that used to be a colony. Yeah. So the history, for example, that I learned when I went to school in Venezuela was very much the history of a country that won an independence war and became a republic. Later on, when I moved to Europe, and I had the opportunity to look, for example, at when I started going to Spain and looking at history books in Spain, and they looking at the way of their relationship with Latin America, was almost like sci-fi for me. The way they were describing that relationship was very, very different to anything that I could recognize. So that, for example, that cultural heritage that we receive, from the school, from family, from the language that we speak, that forms a very important aspect of our identity. And this is very important for us in our journeys with the spiritual life, because in a way that's something that we are trying to understand better and to expand beyond, as it were. Yeah? So for example, when we practice the Metavavanas today, we're trying to move into the realm of selflessness. Yeah? So remove all the barriers that limit us from making a real connection with others. Yeah? As Sangha says, that possibility that we can understand, we can feel that humanity is one. Yeah? So we are not that divided. Yeah? But all these differences are nevertheless very important. Yeah? So we need to recognize them as well. So that makes the whole process a bit difficult. But I really like, there's a beautiful line in the book that Eugene says, the process of understanding the impact of race is more about removing the clouds to see the sky than developing new eyes. So it's more about the way we look rather than us having to change something radically in us. So I tend to be, regretting the way we were born, for example, the caste that we were born, the race we were born in, the country we were born in. Yeah? So it's much more about understanding, working with our views, and that's a very important also idea in Buddhism, that we work with our views. I'm going to say a bit more about that. He uses a very beautiful analogy that we also use in meditation. later on in the book. But that's one concept, that of intersectionality. The other is the window of stress tolerance. Yeah. So we probably are very used nowadays to the idea of wanting to feel safe. I use that expression myself. That I want to feel safe, and I can recognize very clearly when I'm not feeling safe. Either in communication, either in physically unsafe in a particular space. And with this area in particular, racism or race, is very easy to feel unsafe, not just for a person of color, but for a white person as well. Yeah? So it's very difficult to step into that if you feel that somehow you are threatened by the prospect of engaging with that. Yeah? So Eugene acknowledges that people need to feel a measure of safety, but it cannot be too safe, as you need some level of challenge if things are to change and heal. Yeah. For individuals to move beyond where they currently are and into a place of healing, they need to be within this window of stress tolerance. Yeah? So we need a bit of a stress in our lives. It's why we need a bit of challenge in our lives in order to be able to grow and develop. Yeah? And finally, I want to mention the hierarchy of race. You understand that? That's a word that is always difficult for me to make. Hierarchy, yeah, that's it. The hierarchy of race, yeah. And I really like the approach that Eugene is taking in the book, because he's talking about a hierarchy of race based on language. Yeah? So when we're talking about communication, we're talking about using language, to get in relation to others. And he deconstructs this hierarchy with his own example. Yeah. So he says he's aware that he's been educated in the UK, with Oxford English being the proclaimed standard. Yeah. He's been trained, some might say groomed, in a particular style that requires precise and researched arguments that relate to previously valid arguments. Yeah. This style often alienates those who have previously had no connection with these rules of the game, and can be off-putting and inaccessible for many. And he has been trained in psychotherapy with its requirement to reference valid sources. And he acknowledges that in the case of, especially in the case of race, that's an area that there is not much academic interest, in psychotherapy circles. Yeah. So let's pause there a moment. Yeah. If you bring those three concepts to your own experience, yeah, intersectionality, yeah, that wisdom of stress tolerance, and that hierarchy of race based on language. Yeah. What can you recognize from your experience, where you are in relation to that? Just a couple of minutes to think. How are we doing? Good? More or less? Okay. Something that Eugene also says is this area that what he has recognized or noticed, when the issue of race emerges in a conversation or in communication with others. And he very sort of, in a very general way, he has identified sort of two main triggers of reactions. So for a person of color, black, brown, mixed heritage, they can feel sometimes in terms of race, they can feel a very strong sense of a need, almost a duty of speaking out, of talking, of saying what their experience is. It might be associated with a very strong sense of justice, or injustice, something lacking. And for a white person, any notion of race or racism might be very easily understood as a qualification of being a bad person. That might be where they go first. So I can see that in myself, as a person of color. I can see that I feel sometimes a very strong sense that I need to say something. That I need to. And sometimes I have felt that, with some of my friends, white people friends, that sometimes we cannot go there because by me saying something, it might trigger a sense of qualifying them, not necessarily describing an experience, but qualifying them as people, as persons. I realized something that he says later on, that the conversation should be more about what you think, not what you are. So it's not about calling somebody racist or not. It's more about, okay, let's identify where the communication is not working. And just recognize, in this area of views that I mentioned before, that we are not perfect. We are not going to get it right. Anybody else. I mean, I myself, I feel like I'm a mystery to myself sometimes. I feel like I don't fully understand my experience. That I'm trying to make an effort to understand. I've been telling my friends. I've been, since February, I've been doing this process of therapy, talking therapy with somebody, and that it's very confusing. My experience is very confusing, and so it's better if we just drop the expectation, the pressure on ourselves that we need to get it right. So we just accept that we are going to make mistakes, and that's a better, healthier place to engage with this. This endeavor. I really like, there's a TED talk that Eugene recommends. I might mention it later on, that where there is a DJ, a New York DJ, that is talking about his experience of talking about race, and the example that he gives is that, sometimes we think of racism or prejudice, in general, as having tonsils, and so having tonsils in the sense that we want to remove the tonsils, we want to get rid of the prejudice. And I really like the approach that he brings, because he says that every day we are building a bit of a pocket of little prejudice. So we are reinforcing some views. We are indulging in some of that ignorance, avidya in Buddhism. That belief that we know, but we really don't know. We assume a lot of things about others. It might be in the heat of a reaction, that we assume things about others. It might be in the intoxication of our experience. But this New York DJ, says that we should change that approach of thinking of prejudice as tonsils, and wanted to get them removed, and think more about prejudice as plaque or plague in our teeth. So that it develops over time. And that we need to keep cleaning our teeth. So it's like those views, while we are unenlightened beings, we are going to be indulging in views. And we are all susceptible of that, people of color, white people, wherever you are in the race spectrum, we're going to be doing that. Okay, so I'm going to take some risk now, and then I'm going to invite you to go into groups. So I'm going to read a definition of racism that Eugene gives in the book. So the definition is, racism is the local and global power system structured and maintained by persons who classify themselves as white, whether consciously or subconsciously determined. This system consists of patterns of perception, logic, symbol formation, thought, speech, action, and emotional response. So that's the definition. I think that's a bit difficult to grasp. So I'm going to give you a bit of an example, and then we'll go into a bit of a discussion. So he quotes an American counselor and educator called Carla Sherrill. And she talks about the demand to simulate white bodies. She's a black woman. So she says, if I am allowed in white spaces, I must communicate in white styles on white terms. I must simulate white bodies and not explicitly communicate that I'm doing so. I am reminded every day that my livelihood, and indeed my life, may depend on simulating well. She is communicating that systematically there is pressure on the black body to simulate white bodies, and that this pressure is embedded in white institutions. This pressure is also there to remove control from black bodies. She further goes on to say, when I have studied and engaged in experimental learning, when I have studied and engaged in experimental learning exercises associated with embodiment, I have run headlong and bodilong into the violence and violation of racism and white supremacy on and in my black body. Okay. Let's have some space just to be with the experience. And then I want to invite you to go into groups and be as open as you want. What is your response when you hear that? Is that true? It's not true? You feel that is relevant to your experience or not? And then we'll come back. Is that okay? Yeah? Good. Okay, what I suggest is, I think there is a few of you online, so you can have a group online all together, and then maybe it would be good, since we are 4 of the members in the room, if we can divide the room between the 4 of us, maybe 2 go downstairs and the other 2 remain here. And I will say, just free flow, just decide who you want to be with. So I counted earlier, we are 17, I think, in total. So if we divide into 4, it's around 4 people per group. It will be a group with 5. So that's your measure. Yeah. Yeah. So are we back? Everybody back? Yeah, great. Okay, so we have a bit of time just to engage a bit more in the conversation. So in this space, and maybe people online as well, if you want to chip in. Yeah, what happened? What happened there in those dialogues? Anything to share?
I think really relate to the lady that you talked about, the black lady.
Yeah, let me just bring the microphone to you. Yes. For the sake of the people online.
The black lady that had tried to assimilate herself into white culture. And I think I was saying to the group that what was really quite painful was that I didn't realise I was doing that until really kind of recent years. So a bit like a blinkered horse, just going along and trying to fit in because I didn't want to stand out, for lots of reasons, partly because that could have been a threatening situation, or it could have been because you weren't accepted, you want to be accepted and wanted to belong. Yes, I could really identify with that actually, and it is quite painful admitting it though, in such kind of later years, like I've ignored it. Yeah.
Something that came up for us in that recognition that Gita was talking about, but also an aspect. I don't think we are going to have time to go too much into detail tonight or that, but this is this area of trauma, and what we carried in our bodies, which is a big part of the exploration in Eugene's book. And something that he mentions at the end of this chapter, this is all based in the first chapter of the book. Yeah? So he talks about intergenerational trauma. Yeah. So, for example, those of us, well, I'm an immigrant, like Olmer, or Dhanashree, immigrants. But you are an immigrant as well, I suppose, Oscar. You are an immigrant as well, yeah, Chandradasa. But yeah, for example, those of you who were born in this country, but you are from, just first generation or second generation, there is something that your parents face in assimilating to the culture, as you say that. Yeah. But also Ru was talking about, the experience of people living in villages outside Nottingham, and sort of the history of miners, working class white people, And just, for what I know of the Industrial Revolution in this country, that was so brutal. Yeah. So the way people were treated, during the Industrial Revolution in this country. And that doesn't go away, that gets passed on. Yeah. And Ru was talking about the culture, the particular culture that might still be alive in certain villages around Nottingham. It sort of carries on certain values, certain views. Yeah. Something also that he mentions in this chapter is the whole area of colonialism and imperialism. So the British Empire disappeared, in the late 40s, but imperialist culture doesn't just go away like that. Yeah, so it carries as well certain values, certain attitudes. Yeah? So that's part of the whole complexity of what we are talking about as well. We have still 3 minutes. So anybody online or anybody here in the room that would like to share? Yeah, Paraga.
Because it's so much more difficult to say something in a bigger group, isn't it? Yeah, I suppose I just share what I shared in the smaller group is that I suppose when George Floyd was brutally murdered, I felt two things after that. One was it felt like I suddenly heard the voices of people of colour that I hadn't heard since birth, really, that had been sort of imploring me, whispering to me, shouting at me, and I just hadn't heard them. and I suddenly heard them, and like very directly, and in my heart I heard it. I felt, but then I felt a real experience of sort of shame, and I still feel that. And there's that the idea of the tonsils work, you know, it's like that's what I'm thinking about, and I know that's not helpful, and I know that's sort of not a creative response as well. But it's just very sort of painful in a way to know what to do. And I suppose these conversations are just a very helpful sort of way to negotiate all of that, because it's you know, as a white middle class male, yeah, I feel this sort of shame, and I know that's not right or not helpful either. And it's just sort of just working with that. Yeah, just wanted to say that. Yeah.
Anybody else? No, you don't need that. Okay. Yeah. Mm. Mm.
As hard as the project is, I definitely relate to the huge, massive amount of guilt and shame that I feel as a white person. Yeah.
Mm.
It's the want to like help and kind of talk about it, but with also not taking up the space as a white person as well.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. No, thank you, Ru. Yeah. And something just want to finish with. Well, I'm going to give you the title of the TED Talk, so you can look at that about the tonsils and the plague, which is very humorous, but also very serious in the sense of the ideas that is shared. But also just you know, the Buddhist perspective about human life is that being human is precious. You know, there's a preciousness of being human. Yeah. And race, as we said before, you know, it's a cloud. Yeah, in a way, it's a view that we can invest a lot of energy. But we need to acknowledge that it's part of our identity. But at the same time, you know, that just recognize the commonality, what we share with the rest of humanity. So that's very important for what we're trying to do here, you know, as a community, as a Sangha. So the TED Talk is by a guy called Jay Smooth, and it's called How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love Discussing Race. Yeah. How I learned to stop worrying and love discussing race. And it's 9:30 now. So thank you everybody for coming. Yeah, and keep. Yeah, thank you.